Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Hargis.
Hey folks, if you have listened to the show in the last year or so, you have heard me stress my concern over the genocide in Gaza. We've seen this genocide ramp up with what seems like no end in sight. The vast majority of Christians dismiss this as Israel defending themselves against a terrorist organization. But is that exactly what is happening? Today, Grace Batchoun, the founder of Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, comes on the show to set the record straight.
Let's go. Yeah. Left, right, left, right, left. We got our marching orders, man. Left, right, left, right. We'd rather serve God than serve Caesar, you feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to live.
You were recommended to me by a listener that if I could tell by his messaging, I don't want to misquote him, but it seemed like he was kind of on the same kind of lines of how a lot of Christians view the situation, the genocide, the war, the conflict, whatever you want to call it in Gaza, between Gaza or in Gaza. He kind of sided with the same way that a lot of us did, especially like I did too, as Israel's just defending itself. And he said by talking to you or listening to you or reading your stuff, it really helped change his mind on the way he viewed that stuff. So I really appreciate him letting me know about you because I'm looking forward to this conversation. This is a conversation that I want to keep going as much as possible because, like I said in the intro, it doesn't seem to be going away and it seems to be getting worse. And so what I would like to do before we get too far into it, why don't you give us some background of yourself and then we'll get into the discussion today.
Sure, happy to. So my name is Grace, and my parents are Palestinians who were born in Palestine. And unfortunately, they were expelled in 1948, and they went to Lebanon. They were in Lebanon as refugees, grew up through the Lebanese Civil War, then became refugees again, and came to Canada. So I am a Christian. I accepted the Lord here in Montreal. My background was Orthodox Christian, like you've got different denominations of Christians in the Middle East. But when I came here, I was very involved with the International Students Ministry, and I became Christian through InterVarsity Christian Fellowship at the age of 19. I was extremely involved in the church, leading women's ministries, evangelism. My husband was an elder. We facilitated so many of the Alpha courses, marriage courses, anything you could think of. We would have a Bible study every week at our home and another gathering every week, at least 2 full meetings at our home, bringing Christians together for fellowship. I have 3 kids. They are right now young men. So I'm Palestinian. My parents are Palestinian, but I grew up in Lebanon. And we were always not sure what to say. Are we Palestinians? Are we Lebanese? Are we Christians? And I came here to study. I was first accepted into medical school in France because I always excelled in my studies. I was one of the top students in Lebanon. And then because of the war in Lebanon, I came to Canada in order to be able to bring my whole family, to be able to settle here. And I had a great career in information technology. And in 2002, when Israel went into Jenin, the Jenin refugee camp, another elder from the church, sent me an email. And at that time, that was before our cellular and phones. I used to print key stuff and I would read them in bed. And I read about a young man, 37 years old, who is paraplegic, who is in a wheelchair, and an Israeli tank went over him and crushed him. And he had like a sheet, like a white flag in his hand. Okay. And the Israeli tank crushed him. His name is Salam Fayed. in front of his family, crushed him in his wheelchair. That's when, where before I was only focused on my family and my career, I wasn't getting involved in anything political. That's when, for the first time, I said, I cannot believe this is happening. And that's when I went to, my husband and I were sponsoring many children through World Vision. And I reached to World Vision and I said, do you have any Palestinian children that we can sponsor? And then I went back to World Vision. I said, we've got to help. Tell us, what do the Palestinians need on the ground? How can we help them? So I really started the work doing humanitarian projects with World Vision, where we equipped the clinic for women giving birth at the checkpoint. In 2002, you had 17 women who gave birth at a checkpoint in Hebron, and 7 of the babies died because they wouldn't allow them to go to the hospital to give birth. So they gave birth at the checkpoint. And at that point, I was pregnant with my 3rd boy. So we raised $125,000. We've equipped the clinic because they had the doctor, they had the clinic, but they didn't have the equipment. Then we did another project. And then we were, when you do things, you start meeting other people like you. And that's when we said, do you know what? The problem is not a humanitarian problem. The problem is an occupation problem. We could empty our pockets to help the Palestinians. But what we need to do, we need to help people understand what's going on in order to stop the occupation. Because as long as the occupation, the brutal military oppression, the constant colonization of Palestinian land continues, there will constantly be suffering and horror and pain and death and destruction. And that's when myself and a few others, we co-founded Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. And the mission is to empower, we're here in Canada, but our mission is to empower Canadians of all backgrounds to promote justice, development, and peace for everyone in the Middle East and here at home. So that's, in short, a quick summary.
Well, that's fascinating. And I don't know you, but I'm very proud of what you're doing and sticking to it. But you said something that I thought was very important, in that you said it's not a humanitarian crisis, it's an occupation crisis. And I think that's where a lot of what I'm seeing when I talk to Christians in America about this, about what's going on, they just look at it as like Israel's trying to take their land back. They're not the occupiers. And that's the way I used to believe it too. I no longer believe that anymore. I think, and I try to hammer it home when I'm talking to some of these Christians too. I said, your view, and I can speak to you like this because you're a Christian as well. You're viewing Israel as a nation state. As a Christian, we're viewing Israel as a people of God. Okay, like the church today is Israel. Israel in the Bible was not a nation state.
Exactly.
This is where a lot of confusion comes in for Christians right now, because that's what and I'm telling you, I've talked to a lot of Christians I used to go to church with about this.
Yeah, me too.
And they see it when they read Israel in the Bible. They're reading it as they're not understanding that's not a nation state in the Bible. And I think that's a big problem among Christians.
It is. And what people need to understand is, like, we are the new Israel. Like, the Bible, is so clear about it. We are the ambassadors of Christ. For example, Galatians 3:29, it says, and if you are in Christ, then you are Abraham's offsprings, heirs according to the promise. And the verse that made me accept the Lord was in John, all those who believed in him. For although John, all those who believed in him, he gave them the right to become children of God. So we are the children of God. And God is not in the real estate business. Okay? Jesus came for everyone. And the way I see it is, if you like, you could look from a Bible perspective, okay? And the Bible is very clear, like Colossians, like 3:11, where it says, there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. Therefore, as God's chosen people, we are the chosen people, holy and clearly loved. Clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. And what kills me, Craig, what really, really kills me as a Christian is that, and I have many friends, who are Christians, evangelical, who are so blindly supporting Israel. And they are seeing how Israel is committing a genocide, committing war crimes, starving 2.3 million people, demolishing, razing almost all of Gaza, bombing hospitals, schools, people in tents. I don't know if you saw the latest pictures of last week. A young man, top student, 19 years old, on IV, okay, in a tent in a hospital, incinerated, a 2,000-pound bomb dropped on people. These are human, intense. And Christians is like closing their eyes as if nothing is happening. Israel can do whatever they want. Where are the peacemakers? Doesn't Jesus calls us to be to the ministry of reconciliation? Doesn't he ask us to love mercy, to seek justice, to be peacekeepers? Yet I don't hear anyone talking about peace. And what drives me crazy is that we continue, like as the US, giving them billions and billions and billions every couple of weeks of arms to continue to kill a population who is on the brink of death because they're all starved. And we as Christian, it's like, oh, it's okay. We don't see them as human beings. So what would it take for Christians to see Palestinians as equal human beings who want to live in freedom and dignity and free from occupation and oppression?
I did not see that particular image, but I think it's the same area where it made me tear up. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was images you could see children inside these tents on fire, burning alive. And I think that's the same area that you're talking about. It was a makeshift hospital, basically, and then Israel just bombed them.
That's it. Exactly.
That is not of God. If you're going to call Israel of the God's people, this is of the devil. This is not things that Jesus would condone at all. Not even a percent.
Exactly.
And it's terrifying that so many Christians just turn a blind eye to it. I think that's why I'm glad we're going to get to talk to you today too, because it's been very frustrating for me to talk to other Christians about this because they just don't. I think it starts at the church. I can't blame public schools or government schools, but I can blame the church on this because the pastors are not telling the truth on this. And maybe these pastors don't know either.
And for me is, how could you call yourself a Jesus follower when you are supporting the starvation, the bombardment, the killing of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, who 70% of them are children and women, of collective punishment of over 2.3 million people? Jesus is completely just like the opposite. If someone is hungry, like you feed him. If someone is thirsty, you give him food. And here we are, we're just doing the opposite. We're just enabling the starvation, the total destruction of a total population of 2.3 million people. And if you think of Gaza, Gaza is very small. It's 25 miles long and 3.5 to 7 miles wide. So the total area is 140 square miles. It's very small, and it's the most densely populated area. And so far, and this data is from a few months back, over 75,000 tons of explosive have been dropped on Gaza. 75,000 tons. A ton is 1,000 kilograms. 75,000 tons of explosive. Thousands of 2,000-pound bombs dropped on tents, civilians living in tents, being burned alive.
Since when has this been going? The 75,000 tons?
This is since last October.
Not that it makes a difference, the timeline, don't get me wrong, but I think when you cut it down to just since like last October, because a lot of people go back to October, this is why Israel defended themselves, October of 2023, if I'm...
Right, 7th of October, 2023, yeah. So I don't think this is something that honors God. And there is a preacher that I really like in Bethlehem, and he gave a sermon later on. He said, if Jesus were here, he would be under the rubble.
Yeah, 100%.
You have over 10,000 people who are under the rubble right now. And I pulled up some more data. It's like 123 schools and universities completely destroyed, completely. 17,000 children have lost one or both parents. The highest number of children amputees in the world is in Gaza. Imagine, 2,000 children amputees, and doctors had to cut their limbs without any anesthesia. 12,000 women killed. 70% of those who killed are women and children. Okay? Right now, they say around 50,000 have been killed since last year. But according to the credible journal, The Lancet, they say at least 180,000 Palestinians have been killed so far. And Israel continues to deny them medical supplies, water, food. They don't allow any aid trucks to get in.
It's an extermination. I've been told at least 3 times over the last 2 weeks that I don't understand what genocide means. And I said, okay, if I'm using the phrase genocide wrong when describing what's happening in Gaza right now, what do you want me to call it? Do you want me to call it terrorism? Do you want me to call it mass murder? What do you want me to call it? And then I just share the definition of genocide. And this is exactly what's happening in Israel. There's no denying this.
And when you call Palestinians animals and cockroaches, and when you say you want to raise them to the ground, and these are ministers in Israel, Galen, the defense minister, and others. That's what genocide, that's the start of genocide, plus the International Court of Justice. South Africa brought the case to the International Court of Justice, and the International Court of Justice said, yes, all of these are indications of a plausible genocide. So there's no one who's questioning that Israel is or has or continues to commit genocide. There is no question about that. Just look at the numbers, look at the horrors that Palestinians have been living day after day.
I can't remember who said it, but it was, and I think I mentioned this to you on the phone the other night, but it was a Holocaust survivor came out and said, this is worse than what happened during the Holocaust.
Yeah.
You're talking about a survivor of what happened in the Holocaust saying this. And I apologize for not remembering the guy's name, but it was just when you could read something like that, and I have to assume it's true.
Yeah, I think there's Norman Finkelstein, there is Gabor Mate, there is Gideon Levy, and so many of them, have stated the same thing. But, we could just go to the International Court of Justice, and that's what the International Court of Justice said.
Hey folks, do you like salsa? I love salsa. I have come up with a fire recipe, and we have been shipping this homemade salsa all across the country. If you like salsa and want a cool way to support the project and spread the message of no king but Christ, then holler at us. You can reach us at badromansalsa@gmail.com or visit the official Bad Roman Salsa Facebook page and message us there. Thank y'all so much for your continued support. Now let's get back to the show.
I'm going to go back to my father, and I just love my father. I lost him, a few years back. So my father would tell me they were very wealthy in Palestine. They were living in Jaffa, which is right now Tel Aviv. And I went back to the house where they used to live, and right now it is a school. And I knocked on the door, and I asked them, what was this before? And they said, Dar Batchoun, which means the house of Batchoun. And in Arabic, Dar means the living room, like the home of Batchoun. Like imagine, they told me that this used to be our home, but we're not allowed to go back. We're not allowed to go back or to take possession. Okay? Anyone, any Jewish person who has no family, nothing, no link to Israel, can go anytime and live there. But me, where our house is still there, our land is still there, our names is in the business phone book, we've got deeds to the land, but yet we're not allowed to go back. So just going back to my father used to tell me he had a neighbor, he had like a Jewish neighbor, and they used to spend lots of time together. There was not an issue. Prior to 1947, there was no issue. And Jewish people, like they owned in the beginning of the 1900s, they owned less than 3% of the land. The rest of the land, it was Palestinians who were owning it. So that they lived together. But what happened because of the Holocaust and the anti-Semitism that was in Europe, the anti-Semitism started in Europe. And then there was the Balfour Declaration where they said, Balfour said, we look in favor for Jews to settle in Palestine. It was to settle in Palestine on the condition that they do not impact the Arab Palestinian population. Okay? But then the Zionist agenda was, we're going to go, we want to take Palestine, and we want to kick out, expel all the Palestinians. We want Palestine without the Palestinians. And the biggest lie all along was that, it was an empty land, and if you look at pictures, if you just look up history of Palestine, they had their own money, they had their airport, it was a country like any country. My father used to export. They were the very big exporters and importers. They used to export the oranges, the Jaffa oranges, to England and everywhere in Europe. So they were living. The Palestinians had nothing to do with the Holocaust. They were just happily living on their land. And my grandfather was a big businessman, and he kept buying land and land and land and land. And my grandfather, when they were expelled in 1948, he was in his early 50s. Few months later, he got a heart attack and he died in his early 50s because he just couldn't believe that they were expelled from one day to the other, where they were rich, living very well, huge homes in Jaffa and in Jerusalem, tons of lands, living very well with his family and 6 kids and everything else, to the next day having nothing, just the clothes on their back, expelled out of their land, out of their home, with absolutely nothing. And he died a few months later. So my point is, the Palestinians were there. You had over 1 million Palestinians living there. And at the beginning, the Palestinians, the Palestinians were welcoming the Jewish people. Do you know, like the models, Bella Hadid and her sister, the Hadid sisters, the 2 models?
I'm not familiar, no.
Okay, they are American, originally Palestinian model, and their father is from Palestine, and they have a huge house. And she told it on YouTube. You could look her up, Bella Hadid. And she said, our parents welcomed Jewish family to come live with us. They welcomed them and they lived with them for a year. And after a year, that Hadid family were going back to their house. And the Jewish family said to them, no, you're not allowed in this house anymore. You're being kicked out. Okay. So Palestinians did receive the Jewish people at the beginning. And then the United Nations decided, after all the immigration, after the Holocaust and the Second World War, when we started with Jewish people only owning like 3% of the land, by 1947, the population grew to 30%. Okay? So the Jews owned 6% of the land and they were 30% of the population. Okay? But the United Nations, they decided to split Palestine. And even though they owned only 6% of the land, the United Nations gave them 55% of the land, and they gave the Palestinians 45% of the land, even though they were the majority. Okay? And then there was the war, and that's when Israel expelled over, it wasn't Israel then, but it expelled over, the Haganah and all the Jewish, and they are known to be Jewish terrorist organization. They expelled over 800,000 Palestinians from their home, and they committed so many massacres like Deir Yassin's and others to get the Palestinians to leave. And that's why you've got now Palestinian refugees in Gaza, in the West Bank, in Jordan, in Lebanon, in Syria. And until now, 7 decades later, you've got over 5 million Palestinian refugees. And then there was the war in 1967, and Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza. And since 1967, the West Bank and Gaza, they are under a brutal military occupation. Okay? So the Palestinians have been under a brutal military occupation for years. But not only that, like imagine you've got, like we occupied Germany. Did we move 1 million of Americans into Germany and settle Germany? We did not. But what Israel did, Israel right now, they moved over 800,000 settlers, Jewish people who would come from Russia, from New York, from anywhere, anyone who wants to settle. They give them money, they give them tax breaks, and they are taking away Palestinian lands, okay? And they're putting these settlers in the heart of Palestinian territories. So they put them in the heart of Palestinian territories, and then they say, oh, we need all the land around. We're gonna demolish all of your homes. We're gonna raise all of your olive trees, 2,000-old olive trees. We're taking all of that land because we want to protect these settlers. And then they say, oh, now we need to make a highway from there, from the West Bank to Jerusalem, and only Israeli Jews are allowed to go on that highway. Palestinians are not allowed to go on these highways. And they keep taking more and more and more and more and more and more of the land. So this is what Palestinians are living through. And I went there 6 years ago, and I met with some women, and they told me, if Israel wants to take our land, let them take our land, but please, we don't want them to touch our children. I said, what do you mean? She said to me, they always come between 12 and 2 o'clock in the morning. We keep our clothes on. We sleep with our clothes. We keep our kids with us in bed. They come, they take our kids to terrorize them, to ask them questions, who hates us? They take them to prisons in Israel, which is completely illegal according to the Geneva Conventions. Parents don't know where their kids are. They don't know when they're going to come back. And she said, this is what we live with day in, day out. So Palestinians, not only they're occupied brutally, they are being oppressed. They don't have control over anything in their lives. They can't go in, go out without approval from Israel. Checkpoints everywhere. Talking about checkpoints, there is a gentleman, just an amazing guy. I really would like you to look him up. His name is Stephen Sizer. And Stephen said to me, if you want to see what Palestinians go through, you've got to come at 2 o'clock in the morning and see what it's like in the checkpoint. I said, okay. I didn't wake up at 2. I joined him at 4. I went, the checkpoint is inside the Palestinian territories, inside the occupied Palestinian territories. The checkpoint is in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is in the occupied Palestinian territories. There were thousands of guys in cages trying to make it to the other side in order to be picked up as day laborers at 7 o'clock. And if they are not there at 7 o'clock, to be picked up to work on their stolen land to build houses for the Israeli settlers. Okay? If they weren't there at 7 o'clock, they wouldn't be picked up, and they need to work. Like, look at that humiliation. And thousands of them. And Craig, I can tell you, never in my life I cried. I couldn't stop crying as much as I cried when I saw them. And then I would turn my head, and these young men, like 15, 16, 17, age of my kids, would say to me, it's okay, don't cry. We have been living this. This is what we do every day. This is our life. But just go tell the world what we're living through. This is what people don't understand. Like the people in Gaza, like imagine you are in Gaza in an open air prison. You can never dream of going out. You could never dream of traveling, studying abroad. I remember Hillary Clinton, when she went to visit, there was a list of over 200 items of things that are not allowed to be in Gaza. For example, she was saying, pasta, why wouldn't you allow pasta in Gaza? Pens are not allowed, musical instrument not allowed, chocolate not allowed. And they say it, just look it up. They say, we want to keep them on a diet. And they tell you how many calories they want to keep them on a diet. So people were in open air prison. Who wants to continue living under a brutal occupation year after year after year after year?
It sounds to me, by listening to you say that, they're taking their land and then they're taking the people of Palestine and just using them as slave labor.
That's exactly it. And that's what they want.
And they just want to survive. And they've gotten so used to it, like those young men told you, to go tell the world what you're seeing.
For me, looking at what's happening right now in Gaza, and if you look at what's happening right now in northern Gaza, you have 400,000 people, and they told them, you've got to move south. They have blocked northern Gaza where they're not allowing any food, anything, absolutely. Like there's no water, no food, nothing. And if you've seen the pictures lately, thousands of people just walking with nothing with their kids to go South Gaza. So they want, the way I see it, they just want to get rid, to kill. They don't see any value for a Palestinian life. They want the land. And honestly, why no one is talking about hostages? Okay? I'm not supportive of Hamas, but Hamas said, stop, let's have a ceasefire and we'll release the hostages. But Israel said no. No one is talking about hostages right now. Does anyone talk about the over 10,000 Palestinian hostages in Israeli prisons? And most of those people, it's arbitrary detention where they will never go in front of a judge, where they will never be judged. Israel could keep them, could torture them for years and years and years. No one knows where they are. And another thing that people do not know is that in the Likud platform, okay, it's clearly stated that Israel will never allow for a Palestinian state. So Israel does not want to allow for a Palestinian state. So they've done ethnic cleansing in 1948, and they are continuing to do ethnic cleansing right now in Gaza.
I want to back up a little bit because you mentioned something too this is what I try to get people to understand who, when they listen to conversations like this, that we're not in support of Hamas either.
No. We are for human rights.
They jump to it immediately whenever you start pointing out what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. And they're like, well, they tell Hamas to back off, tell Hamas to stop using the Palestinians as his human shields and stop telling them tell them to stop attacking Israel, and this will all go away. But you just said that they called for a ceasefire and Israel said no.
Yeah.
They've even gone so far to say that they accept the original terms of the ceasefire.
Yes.
And Israel's still saying no. So they're wanting we want a ceasefire, and Israel's the one saying no.
Over and over and over. And as much as like no one is for Hamas, Hamas had accepted peace with Israel if Israel were to go back to the 1967 borders, and Israel said no. Okay. So it really shows you Israel's intent is on driving the Palestinians out of Gaza, out of the Palestinian territories, and to take as much land as possible. If Israel wanted peace, why would Israel continue exponentially colonize the West Bank? Why are they in the West Bank? If Israel wants peace, why did Israel build a wall of 8 meters high over hundreds of kilometers, most of it inside the Palestinian territories? There is enough land for both people. There is enough land for both people. But that's not what Israel wants. And I ask the people who are questioning who we support. We are human beings who need to speak out. God calls us to speak out against oppression and against injustice. We are for human rights. We are for international law. If Israel were to abide by the international law, we would not be here. There are hundreds of resolutions, UN resolution, Security Council resolution, and Israel blatantly violates all of them. And they keep getting away with everything.
And they keep getting away with it too. But I want to get to this too, because I know you're in Canada. Speaking of Israel getting away with all of this for so long now, I think it has a lot to do with the support of the United States government. And I want to ask you about the Canadian, because you mentioned in our email about the billions of dollars that the U.S. sends to Israel, the weapons that they're sending to Israel. Are you seeing the same thing from the Canadian government? Because like I told you through email, we've got listeners all over the world.
Yeah, unfortunately, if you look at the United Nations resolutions, and hundreds of them were voted against Israel. If you look at who votes against these resolutions, so you have over I forgot now how many countries we have, but around, let's say 175 countries are voting in support of resolutions, in support of human rights, in support of international law, in support of Palestinian human rights. Okay? And the only people who are against, it's mostly Israel, United States, Canada, Australia, Micronesia, and another island in the Pacific who fully depends on the United States. But the whole world is in support of Palestinians' human rights, the whole world. And all of these United Nations resolutions, anything that goes to the Security Council, unfortunately, the US has a veto on it. And the US continues to veto in support of Israel. So there is just a blind support for Israel. And the way I see it is, if the United States really cares about Israel, if they really care about a peace for Israel, they would really work with both of them to be peacemakers, peacekeepers, get some UN peacekeepers there, find a solution to the conflict, because violence will only begets more violence. We're not going to solve this problem by, if you continue occupying Palestinians, you will never have peace. And if we care about Israel, we care about peace in the region. If we want Israel to live in peace, then help Israel to stop occupying the Palestinian people. As long as there is occupation, there will never be peace.
And I think that's too something that a lot of folks are confused about, or maybe they just don't want to pay attention to it or acknowledge it, or whatever you want to, however you want to say it. This is something that we've talked about a lot on the show and in other groups and stuff on social media. They always jump to Israel's defending itself. They've never one time considered that the Palestinians maybe want to defend themselves as well.
Exactly.
Okay. And this is again, this is not a defense of Hamas.
Yeah.
And I'm not against the people of Israel either. What I'm for is the people caught in between these two warring factions.
Exactly.
Okay. I want the Israel people to live in peace just as much as I want the Palestinian people to live in peace.
Yeah, that's what I want.
And that's not going to happen as long as we keep supporting Israel's massacre of Palestinians. And this, again, not a defense of Hamas. But at some point, and I've said this over and over too, if this was happening in your neighborhood in America and your family was being pulled out of your house and being replaced by other families, what the hell are you going to do? Are you not going to stand up and say, "Hang on a second, I don't think I like this. I'm going to defend my property, my land, my home, and my family"?
Absolutely.
That's just human nature. And I'm a pacifist. Listen, and I told you this on the phone the other day too. I'm a pacifist. I abhor violence of any kind. Okay, it means killing somebody. I'm just not for that. But at the same time, if that was happening in my neighborhood, I would be defending them to the teeth.
Exactly.
As much as I could. And that's just a natural human reaction. I think people just all of a sudden just like, well, the Palestinians, and I've heard them say this, they should just lay down and let Israel have it. Well, it sounds like they're exhausted and that's what's going to happen at some point.
What does it mean, have it? Like kill them all? Continue to demolish their homes? Continue to expel them? Continue to take away their land? Continue to go in the middle of the night, take away their children and their kids away from them and throw them in jail? What do you want Palestinians to do? Continue to starve them? Continue to make them live in a brutal occupation in an open air prison? You see, another thing, as you're talking, I was thinking of something. Israel is the occupier. Israel is occupying them. Israel is the occupier. As an occupier, according to the Geneva Conventions, these are laws that were put by the United Nations in times of war. The occupier should take care of the people that they're occupying. But Israel is doing just the opposite. So it's not Israel who has the right to defend itself. According to the international law, it's the Palestinians who have the right to resist against the occupier.
You know, we're recording this just a few days before the next U.S. election. And I keep seeing, I see these, and I will use this as arguments against both sides because I don't vote. I don't spend any time participating in it as a Christian. This just goes against what I believe. Now, as I see the Republicans and Democrats fighting for stupid, irrelevant things, I'm like, you do understand whoever wins, it doesn't matter who wins in the next election. This is going to continue in Gaza. There's a proven track record among Republicans and Democrats in the United States government that they will support Israel no matter what. And it's almost like the United States government is bought and paid for by the Israelis.
That's exactly it. Look up the numbers. That's exactly it. Look at, your politicians, and that you will find out how AIPAC is buying each one of them with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. That's exactly it. And what kills me is that those billions and billions and billions of dollars that the United States, you guys, as US taxpayers, you're giving to Israel to maim, to destroy, to raise a total population. Why not imagine if these billions of dollars were invested in building, in education, in peacemaking? How would the world be a better world? And why all of our politicians, why no one is talking about peace? Why no one is talking about peace? Even Christians. Why don't we talk about peace? Why don't we talk about justice? Why don't we stand up for the oppressed? This is our calling. This is what Jesus calls for. He says, be the voice of the oppressed. Why aren't we doing that? Why are we supporting the oppressor, the killer? What's going to take for Christians to see Palestinians as any other Christian? They want to live in freedom. They want to live in dignity. They want to live just like anyone else. They want to have access to food. They want to have access to water. They want to take care of their children. They want to see their children grow healthy and graduate. Now what I hear families, mothers say, it's easier for us to die than to keep living and seeing our kids starve to death. We don't have a drop of water to give them.
Hey folks, we have set up a very simple way to donate to the Bad Woman Project through spotfund.com. Just go to SpotFund and search No King But Christ. This has become necessary to continue to provide a quality podcast and keep production costs down as well. Just $5 or $10 a month will go a long way in helping us keep this project going and continue spreading the very basic message of No King But Christ. So if you like what we were doing and can find it within your budget, go to spotfund.com and search No King But Christ, and you can set up monthly donations or even donate one time. Any and all donations help more than you know. And as always, any donations above production costs will go directly to charities in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank y'all so much. Now back to the show. I get pulled into these political groups on Facebook or any social media sometimes, and I don't know how I get stuck in them because some of the arguments are so absurd to me. But I had a guy tell me last night before coming on the show today that everything he needs to know about Islam he learned on 9/11. And I said, that's absurd. I said, I know many, many, many Muslims who are peaceful people.
Exactly.
I've lived next to them. I've worked
Right.
with them. I've shook their hands. I mean, we've sat and ate dinner together. I know that what you that's ridiculous to look at 9/11 and just assume that everybody is evil in that religion. Now, you and I are both Christians, and now this is another thing that blows my mind that Christians will not recognize that there's Palestinian Christians being slaughtered by the Israeli government that you are supporting. They are bombing churches.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know how you could just turn a blind eye to that. Well, we just got to support Israel. It's absurd to me.
Do you know, maybe what you should say to them, imagine if we were to say everything that we know about Christians is from Timothy McVeigh, who did the Oklahoma City bombing.
That's a great comeback, actually.
It's like, it's just stupid. It's just stupid. It's just totally stupid. It's like,
absurd.
It's crazy how people think that way. It's like, go out, meet some Christians, meet some Muslims, meet some other people.
I've told this story on the show. It's been a few years back. And I was living in an apartment in Northwest Arkansas, and this guy lived across from me. And I can't remember what can't remember what country he was from. He was celebrating Ramadan, but he was cooking some food. And I walked by him. I was on my way to work. And he said, I'll bring you some. I said, well, I'm going to work right now. And I told him the next day I was going to be off work. I got a knock on the door. He brought me a plate full of food. It was delicious. I don't remember what it was, but I remember it being very good.
I have lots of Muslim friends. I have so much respect for them. They want to live peacefully as well. And you know what? Like you've got extremism in every religion.
Right.
You see what I mean? We've got Christian extremism, So, you've got like Christians, let's say, who would go and like bomb, abortion clinics. So you can't say it's like, okay, these are the Christians that I know. You've got all kinds. So we really shouldn't focus on like the bad apples. Let's focus on working towards what God calls us to do. Okay. I don't think it is God's plan to impose a genocide on the people of Gaza, who is the most bombed area in the world. I don't think it's honoring what's going on. And as Christian, we should not support that. As Christian, we should be challenging our politicians to seek peace, to find a solution. This has been going on for so long. So many people are suffering. And this goes from generation to generation to generation to generation. And I tell people, if you really care about Israel, if you really, really love Israel, then encourage Israel to respect international law, to stop its occupation, and to start living peacefully with its Palestinian neighbors. Already Israel has more than 80% of the land of the historic Palestine. So you have more than 80%. Why don't you let the Palestinians live freely on 20%? Why all that greed? You have over 80%. But no, it's not enough 80%. I'm going to occupy them, and I'm stealing away their land, and I'm moving close to 1 million of my people inside their territories. So we kick them all out. Is this just? Is this what we're called to watch and accept and support with our billions of tax money?
It's heartbreaking.
Like, how can we accept that as Christians? Like, how can we accept that as Christians? We call ourselves like a Christian nation, yet we're investing billions and billions and billions and billions in war, in killing and maiming. How do we accept that?
It's hypocritical. And I'll tell them too that, well, to answer your question, I think, like I mentioned it earlier on the show, I think it all goes back to the church and how these Christians are being taught, and the garbage are being taught in a lot of these churches too.
Yeah.
And they just believe everything their pastors say, and a lot of these American pastors, I can't speak for Canadian pastors, but a lot of these American pastors are getting this wrong.
Yeah.
They're getting it wrong. And you got too many people who blindly follow a man's word because he's behind a pulpit somewhere in a church.
There is a verse in the Bible. It often comes to mind when I see posts from evangelical Christians who are blindly supporting Israel. And I don't know how people will take this, but this is the verse that always comes to mind when Jesus says, I never knew you. I never knew you. You don't represent me. You do not represent me. You don't represent Jesus' teaching. This is not what I died on the cross for you to support. This is not my message. And, what does Jesus says? The fruit of the Spirit. Where are your fruit of the Spirit? Where are they? You're just enabling and supporting the murder of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, expelling them from their homes, starving them, collectively doing a collective punishment on all of them. Is this what Christianity is all about? Is this what we want people to know us? For me, it's extremely hypocritical. Don't call yourself Christian. If you want to support Israel, if you want to support the genocide, please don't call yourself Christian.
It's very difficult to have to go explain because, there's a lot of Christians or non-Christians on the outside looking in, seeing how Christians are supporting a lot of this. How can you talk to them about Jesus when you're having to defend a person calling themselves a Christian who's supporting mass murder?
Exactly.
You can't. You're hindering peace by behaving that way. There's no way I could speak to. It's very difficult to call myself a Christian sometimes because I'm having to defend a lot of these people who are supporting mass murder, genocide. That sucks, man. Because you should be able to point out the peace of Jesus and the teachings of Christ, and people can accept that. Because I know a lot. Gotti said something that I love. This quote. He said, "I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christianity." And that holds true to so many other Christians out there who call themselves Christians, but people are looking up like, you're calling yourself a Christian. Well, what is your Jesus saying? If they took the words of Jesus seriously, because I know a lot of non-Christians, even just non-Christians, that'll be like, I like Jesus, I'm cool with Jesus, but the Christianity side of the way Christians are behaving, the way they're supporting stuff like this.
It became too political. The white Christians, the evangelical Christians, they became like just too political. They are more like political Christians versus Jesus Christians.
100%.
They're no longer following the teaching of Jesus. It's like 95% of the 2.1 million people in Gaza are close to starvation.
He said feed them. He said to feed them, not bomb them.
Not kill them. And, some people might say, yeah, but, they want to kill Hamas. They want to kill Hamas, Like if Israel wants to kill Hamas leader, like they're doing, they went into Lebanon, they went, they put all of these bombs in the pagers, they are very sophisticated. They could kill, like the leaders of Hamas. But why demolishing the whole infrastructure of Gaza? Why bombing hospitals? Why bombing schools? Why bombing mosques? Why bombing churches? A few months back, I was in Las Vegas at the huge convention center. And there were over like 20,000 people. Sorry, I was in San Francisco. It was the San Francisco Convention Center. And we saw a police running after someone inside the convention center where you had over 20,000 people. So the police is running after someone, let's say a criminal. Imagine if San Francisco, someone said, or Trump or Kamala Harris or whoever said, we're going to bomb and level all of San Francisco and we're going to kill everyone in order to get that person.
Yeah, it's absurd.
What would be the reaction?
It's absurd.
Would you?
No.
Would you?
It doesn't make any.
Would you bomb all of San Francisco? Would you bomb all the hospitals? Would you bomb all the schools, all the mosques?
No.
All the hospitals, all the clinics? Level it to the ground? Would you bomb all of that to go get after that criminal? And you could say, oh, this is collective punishment. It's okay. We could kill and starve all of those people, 2 million people. That's why you have international law. This is illegal. This is what's called genocide. This is what's called war crimes. And Christians need to wake up because we have been on the wrong side of history so many times, be it with the apartheid of South Africa, be it with the slavery questions, be it with all kinds of things. We have been on the wrong side of history. And Christians who are supporting Israel, they are on the wrong side of history.
100%. And I want to, before I let you go, mention what you said about when you kind of started noticing you were just really kind of focused on your career and your family.
Yeah.
And then that paraplegic that got ran over by the Israeli tank, you were like, it kind of just opened your eyes.
That changed my life. Yeah, that was the trigger for me.
Changed your life. and now you've gone this far now, and you founded the Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East.
Yeah, I co-founded Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. I'm not there right now. I passed it on to someone else, but I did co-found the organization. The organization does amazing work. You could look it up. Everything is professional, factual, credible. It's www.c for Canadians, J for Justice, P for Peace, ME for Middle East.org. So www.cgpme.org. You've got hundreds of fact sheets, very active on social media, so people could follow that. And every single post, everything is based on facts. It's not opinions. It's not, this is what we think, but factual stuff of what's going on, what's happening, and hundreds of fact sheets. Anything you want to know about the history of the conflict, the settlement, the wall, the colonialism, Gaza, it's all there.
Especially the evangelical type Christians have become too political, and they're so entrenched in the state and entangled with the state right now that they don't. It's messed them up.
It's blind support. It's just brainwashing. For me, it's brainwashing. Do you know what I think? I think they lost their capability to think for themselves. They lost the capability to think for themselves.
100%.
I just would love them to stop and think and do some research and think for themselves rather than just repeating what others say.
Right. And I've been using this a lot lately too. Whenever I'm talking to some of them, it's almost like they're in a trance. You can almost see their eyes gloss over when you point something out that Israel's doing. It's like their brain shuts down and they just start repeating the same garbage they keep saying over and over. It's like it's programmed in their brain just to say the same thing over and over.
100%. And, ask them the question, how about what do you want the Palestinians to do? If you were a Palestinian living under occupation, your home is raided, your kids taken away from you, you can't travel, you can't go anywhere, you're in West Bank, you can't visit your people in Gaza, you have to go through checkpoints, hours and hours, checkpoint in order to pass from one village to the other village. What would you do? What do you want the Palestinians to do?
It's a great question. I can tell you, I think I can tell you what their answer is going to be: to stop bombing Israel.
Well, they don't have bombs to bomb Israel.
Well, this is what they're saying. This is what they're being taught. This is what they're programmed to say. It's like I said,
well, Israel has to stop the occupation. It's Israel who's occupying them. You have to think, who is the occupier?
Yeah.
Who is occupying who? Who is stealing the land from who? Who is arbitrarily detaining who?
Yeah.
Who is being starved? Who is being imprisoned? Their life is being restricted. They can't travel, they can't go anywhere. Where are there all the checkpoints? Where are all the settlements? Everything is on Palestinians' lands. So you have to ask, who is the occupier? And it's Israel who is the occupier. And according to international law, it's very clear. You cannot acquire territories by war. It's completely illegal to acquire territories by war. And Israel keeps occupying and occupying and occupying. And now they want to kick out all the Palestinians from Gaza. They even tried to make a deal with Egypt to say to Egypt, take them all into the Sinai and we'll give you billions of dollars. And Egypt said no. So they want the land without the Palestinians. That's what people need to understand. They want the land without the Palestinians. The United Security Council Resolution 242, it says, it is inadmissible to acquire territory by war. Israel is not allowed to acquire territory by war, and Israel should withdraw all their armies from the territories that they occupied. This was in 1967. Does Israel stop occupying? No. Israel keeps occupying, eating up and stealing Palestinian land and driving Palestinians out of their land. That's the unfortunate truth. This is the reality. It's not what I think. And the best thing that you could share with your readers? Just look at the map of Palestine. Just look at the map of Palestine, 1947 to now. 1947, it was all of Palestine. Now, you look what's left in Palestine, it's bits and pieces, completely disconnected, and less than 20% of the total historic Palestine, and all occupied with over 800,000 Israeli settlers. And these Israeli settlers are allowed to have arms, but Palestinians are not allowed to have arms. Like, that's the situation.
Sounds like what the Europeans did in North America, and now we got America. You know, I mean, it seems like the American government basically was stealing land from the Native Americans here.
Exactly.
And forcing them into they're just giving them pieces of land to live in.
That's it.
I mean, it sounds familiar. Maybe that's where they learned it from.
Yeah. But Craig, the difference, that was, we're talking like hundreds of years ago. The difference is the United Nations, the Geneva Conventions, there were laws that put in place to make sure this no longer happens. Okay? We are in 2024. The United Nations was created in 1947 with the Geneva Conventions, and they put laws in times of war. So this no longer happens. So the US cannot come. The US is so much stronger than Canada. So the US cannot come and say, okay, we're coming and occupying you and we're going to take away all of your land. This is illegal by international law. So why are we allowing it for Israel?
You might hear them say something against it, but what are they doing about it? I mean, the talk is cheap to me. They can say all the things that they can point out Israel's violating these laws, but they're not doing anything about it.
They can, because the United States, you're the problem, Craig.
I apologize. I apologize for being born here.
It's the United States. The United States. Their blind support for Israel, providing them billions and billions and billions of arms.
Yeah.
Billions of arms. Just look up how much the United States had already paid. How many billions the states had already given to Israel. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And this is the country who you would expect them to be a beacon for the rest of the world. They're just the opposite. They are enabling evil. They're enabling destruction. That's what they're investing in.
Well, just I want you to know that there's some folks out there like me who are speaking out against it here in America.
I know, and I'm so thankful for you. I was teasing you. I'm so thankful for you. I'm so thankful to so many people who really understand what's going on and who are speaking up. And there are lots of great people who are speaking up. I always like the quote of Martin Luther King, who says, our lives begin to end the day we stop speaking. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter.
Yeah, that gave me chills. I think I've heard that before. But like I said, there's a bunch of us here. We're a small whisper, but we're speaking out. I mean, there's a lot of Americans who are witnessing, seeing it, and pointing it out. But you know, we're vastly outnumbered right now. I'll be honest with you. The folks like me and others who are speaking out against this are vastly outnumbered, but that's not going to stop us.
You know, we have to live with our conscience, and we have to do the right thing. No matter what, we have to do the right thing. Margaret Mead has another quote. She said, I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And I will not let what I cannot do prevent me from doing what I can do.
I wish I could remember things like you do, like that. Watching you remember a quote like that.
Because it spoke to me so much. Sometimes I say, Grace, like, there is so much like horrific things going in this world. How can I make a difference? And then I say, okay, I will not let what I cannot do stop me from doing what I can do. Let me focus on what I can do. And I'm so grateful for you, Craig, because you are doing what you can do. Regardless what's happening around you, you're taking the time to say, do you know what? This is not right. I want to let other people know this is not right. I want to expand their understanding about the horror, the despair, the destitution, the dispossession, the starvation, the genocide, the crimes that Palestinians are living through day in, day out. So let's continue do whatever we can for humanity.
Yeah, I heard something one time, and I can't tell you who said it. I can remember things. I can't just remember. I just don't ever remember who actually said it. But it was something that I use a lot of times when talking about what we do. At the end of the day, nobody can ever say that you didn't at least try.
Exactly. You have to live with your conscience. You have to live with your conscience. We have to do everything that we can to make a difference in this world. And this is what we're called to as Christians. We're called to make a difference. We're called to be the salt, aren't we?
100%.
We're called to be the salt.
Because without this, there wouldn't be any flavor, right?
Exactly. And there are so many Christians where there's no more flavor.
No more flavor.
There's no more fruit, unfortunately.
But there is a remnant out there that's seeking the truth.
Exactly.
Those are who we're focused on. Those are the folks that aren't saying anything, but they're watching. They're paying attention. Those who we're trying to reach.
There's another verse from the Old Testament where it says, their eyes are closed, their ears are closed. Like they don't hear because their ears are closed, and they don't see because their eyes are closed. So hopefully some people's ears would be open and eyes would be open so they could see and hear what's going on.
Well, Grace, I'd like to get you back on the show sometime if you've something else you want to talk about, because we got an hour, but I think I could probably get 3 or 4 more hours out of you if we had time. But
it would be my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, go ahead and plug your stuff one more time, and then I'll let you get out of here and get back to the rest of your day.
Oh, I just want to say Palestinians are just human beings, just like me and you. And as Christians, we are called to care. We're called to care for the oppressed. We're called to be the voice for the voiceless. We're called to seek justice, to love mercy and to seek justice. And we're called to be peacemakers and peacekeepers. So let's do that.
Let's do that. Well, Grace, thank you very much for your time. This has been a fascinating conversation and a lot of hard truths that you said that people need to start paying attention to. Thank you, Grace. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.